Your Beatitudes, Excellencies, friends, I'm grateful and honored to be asked to send along this message about the meaning of Holodamor. For me, it's essential that we remember the victims of the Holodamor as individuals, as children, women, and men whose lives were cut off in the beginning or in the middle before they should have been, each with individual purposes, each with individual trajectories about which we will never learn. And of course, it's important to remember Holodamor as directed against Ukraine and against Ukrainian culture and against a traditional Ukrainian way of life, which was largely destroyed. We have to remember the heartlessness of the measures, the policies that were directed against the peoples who lived in Soviet Ukraine, the ban on peasants from begging in the cities, the ban on inhabitants of Soviet Ukraine from going to other Soviet republics, the seizure of livestock, the enforcement of grain requisitions, the blacklists, measures which deliberately brought about the death of millions of people who did not have to die. The Holodomor is also important because it was at the origins of a certain kind of system. It was at the origins of a Stalinist system. The Holodomor, the starvation of millions of people in Soviet Ukraine, is the first and essential lie of Stalinism. The lie is that this was necessary for some greater good. And that lie becomes the basis of lying as politics, as such. It becomes the basis of the view that the suffering of some must have somehow been good for all, and therefore that any suffering can somehow be justified, that the individual does not matter, no matter how many of them there are, because we are certain of the future. How does this connect to events of today? How do these events of the 1930s help us to understand the war of the 2020s? I think in several ways. One, looking back, I find it very striking that the Russian state spent so much energy trying to deny these last 20 years the historicity, the reality of Holodomor. Again, looking back at this, what this shows is that death by hunger or hunger as a weapon was very much on the official mind of the Russian Federation. And so in that sense, it's not so surprising that hunger has been used as a weapon in this war. Or to put it more directly, it seems like denial of Holodomor was actually preparation for the use of food as a weapon. And of course, food has been used as a weapon in Ukraine. The destruction of the dam at Novій Kachowka, the laying of mines on territories of Ukraine the size of other European countries, the deliberate destruction of ports, ships, grain storage facilities. All of these are about exerting pressure on Ukrainians. But because Ukraine is an exporter of food around the world, this takes on another aspect as well. As President Putin tries to demonstrate his control over Ukraine, he announces to leaders of Africa and Asia that he now is the master of food, that he now is the master of starvation, that he will decide who gets to live and who gets to die, which of course is a very direct echo of the 1930s and the policy of Stalin. A final connection is that just as the Soviet policies were based on the certainty of the future, Putin's policies are based on the certainty of the past. He's sure that there was no Ukraine, there can be no Ukraine, and therefore that anything that is done against Ukrainians must be justified. Just as Stalin and Stalinists were sure that there was one future, that there was going to be a certain kind of communism, a certain Soviet Union, and therefore that anything that was done in Ukraine was somehow justified. I think in all these ways, the events are connected. But of course, memory goes beyond politics. Memory is deserving of its own moment, and I'm very glad to be able to share this moment with you. Thank you very much.